All right, today we're going to break down a really fascinating analysis of a new religious movement brewing in the Netherlands. And what makes this so interesting is that its core theology, well, it seems almost designed to be completely incompatible with modern Dutch society. We're talking about a collision course that feels pretty much inevitable. So let's just start with the central, really provocative idea that frames this whole thing. I mean, what if a church didn't see itself as just part of society? What if it saw itself as a colonial power, sent to conquer it? Yeah, this isn't about fitting in, it's about taking over. And that one question, right there, it gets to the absolute heart of this movement's worldview.
Okay, so Section 1, a culture on collision course. Let's really set the stage here. On one hand, you've got this movement with a super rigid, top-down, theocratic structure. And on the other hand, you have the Netherlands, a culture built on consensus, compromise, and individualism. This isn't just a simple disagreement, you know? It's like trying to run two completely different operating systems on the same machine. It's just not going to work.
And here's the absolute kicker from the analysis. The conflict we're looking at, it isn't an accident, it's not some kind of growing pain. Nope, it's an intentional feature of the movement's theology. You could say it's not a bug, it's a feature. It is literally designed to be at war with its surroundings. All right. Section 2, building a heavenly colony. So how does a group actually get to this point? I mean, how do you start seeing yourself as a conquering power? Well, it all boils down to one very specific and really powerful core idea. They actually have a word for their mission, Verhemmelen Lasierenen, which basically translates to heaven eyes. And let's be clear, this is not about gentle influence or persuasion. The whole concept is lifted directly from Roman colonial strategy. We're talking about imposing your culture, your laws, your language onto what you see as barbaric territory. It's incredibly confrontational. And check this out, this is the actual blueprint they use. The analysis shows they apply this Roman model like one-to-one. Step 1, settle. You establish a little colony of citizens in hostile territory. Step 2, impose culture. You enforce the culture and language of the motherland. And step 3, impose law. You replace all the local customs with your own legal system. So the goal isn't integration at all. The goal is total replacement. And this is where it gets really stark. You can see the fundamental clash right here. On one side, you've got their ideal system of government, an absolute monarchy. Power comes from a king. Leaders aren't accountable to the people. On the other side, you have democracy, power from the people, elected leaders, accountability. For the movement, democracy isn't just another option. They see it as a humanist obstacle, a rebellion that actually blocks what they believe is God's will. Okay, Section 3, the temple versus the synagogue. So you've got this confrontational worldview, but how do you maintain it? How do you keep your group so separate? Well, it turns out they have a primary tool, a theological razor, that they use to isolate themselves and basically delegitimize every other church in existence. They use this concept, this theological razor, to draw a very sharp line in the sand. Basically, they say there are only two kinds of churches in the world. There's their model, which they call the temple, and they believe it's built by God himself, and then there's everyone else. And they dismiss all other churches as man-made synagogues, places where, by their definition, God's glory is just absent. And this table is pretty wild because it lays out their entire worldview so clearly. The synagogue model, which is basically how they see every other church, is all about being a consumer. You show up, you ask, what do I get? It's focused on teaching a single leader. But their temple model, it's the complete opposite. It's about being a priest, not a consumer. The question becomes, what can I give? The focus shifts to sacrifice and a much, much higher frequency of commitment. It totally flips the script. And here's the really crucial part of that shift. By labeling any kind of deep intellectual study or tough questions as synagogue thinking, they effectively shut down critical thought. The focus moves away from scripture and doctrine and onto mystical experiences, feelings of glory. And you can see how that makes it almost impossible to challenge the leadership from the inside, right? Because any logical argument can just be dismissed as old human thinking. All right, Section 4, the high cost of belief. So we've talked about the big ideas, but what does this temple theology actually ask of its members day to day? This is where the rubber really meets the road, and the real cost of this belief system becomes crystal clear. What? Remember how the temple model is about daily commitment? In practice, that's translating to a bare minimum of 3+ meetings a week. We're talking Sunday, Wednesday, and now Saturday too. That's a huge chunk of your week gone. And think about what that level of commitment does. It goes to war with the very fabric of a normal life. Things we all just take for granted. Family time, kids' sports on a Saturday, your hobbies, even just rest and spontaneity. They all have to be sacrificed. And this isn't just about being a dedicated member. It's a classic isolation tactic. It weakens your ties to everyone and everything outside the group until the group becomes your entire world. And if you think about pushing back, whoa. This quote from the source shows the kind of intense psychological pressure they use. If you try to set a boundary, maybe say, hey, I need a night off for my family, it gets framed like this. You're using Jesus for his services, but refusing the marriage covenant. You're essentially being accused of being a spiritual freeloader, wanting the benefits without accepting the total, all-consuming commitment. Okay, so let's get to the final section. An inevitable burnout? We've seen this high-pressure, high-conflict model, so where does it all lead? How does the analysis predict this whole experiment is going to end? Well, the analysis suggests a massive clash is coming on 3 different fronts. First, the temporal front. We're talking pure physical and mental burnout from the time demands. Second, the cultural front. Their no-compromise attitude is bound to clash with a society that runs on it. And third, the ecclesiastical front. By calling every other church a sham, they've basically guaranteed they'll be completely isolated. So what does that look like in practice? Well, scenario 1 is just implosion. The demands are just too high. The human cost of that temple lifestyle becomes unsustainable. People get exhausted, families fall apart, and the whole thing just collapses under its own weight.
Scenario 2 is schism, or splitting apart. And there's a real irony here. You've trained your members to be hypercritical of any system that seems man-made. Well, what happens when they turn that critical eye on their own leaders? The minute a leader seems flawed or makes a mistake, they risk being labeled corrupt, and the whole thing just splinters into a million little factions.
And the final possibility is what the analysis calls the fortress. Basically, the movement realizes that conquering the Netherlands isn't going to happen, so they pivot. The new mission isn't about changing the world outside, it's about maintaining purity inside. They retreat, creating their own little parallel society, with their own schools, their own businesses, completely cut off and isolated from Dutch life. And so when you look at all of this, the analysis leaves us with a really powerful, lingering question. Is this a genuine blueprint for divine glory? Or is it a recipe for human burnout? Is it a system built for God, or one that's almost perfectly designed to create social isolation, psychological stress, and just collapse? It seems like the final chapter on that has yet to be written.